So, thank you very much for coming along today. We've been supporting James for a while. We had a team go down to Newport Velodrome about 6 months ago and got the world record for fastest ever 300 miles and the fastest ever 500 Ks.
Yep.
So that's pretty remarkable. If you don't know James, Liam's his manager over there, so probably part of the journey. He's knocking out world records and maintaining a happy boss, which is great, and staying married. So there's so much more we could all get out of every day if you look at James as an example. But he's the first time I met James, I heard that he had cycled from Land's End to John O'Groats and back in 135 hours, and during that time there's 6 hours sleep. So this really is an extraordinary athlete. And although I look like a body double, and even with Kendall tool beasting me on the peloton, I can get to about 150 watts. He's maintaining 280 watts for almost 3 hours 40. So this is really special. If you're not a cyclist, I think those sort of stats help you understand a little bit about it. So we're blessed today. We've got Julie from Google Cloud Security. We've only just met, but she is absolutely fascinating, so I'm looking forward to asking you more questions, Julie. We've got Ryan, who recently joined the organisation, formerly Chief Commercial Officer at Schlu, largest luxury retailer in the Middle East, and then before that he was at Dyson as Chief Digital Officer, and before that he was enjoying sleep pods and sushi at Google for about 8 years. But I think it's really important to think about the opportunity for Gen AI of bringing together the ads world and the Google Cloud world. So we'll touch on that a little bit. Long-serving, awesome advocate for data and AI and the company, Matt Penton, about 9 years in?
Seven.
A good long shift, and you just think how much has changed at Google Cloud during this period. But Matt and his team, you've probably seen some charts and some wonderful stuff going on. So Matt has been supporting James on his various world records and using Google AI to do that. So I'm going to start with you. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
I'll check the order and stuff.
Yeah,
I don't want to be
that's
slapped
fine.
down if I'm wrong. But so if we look at Gen AI, it's it's very exciting to good people and bad people. Are you seeing, particularly in the Mandiant business, more bad actors using Gen AI with any effect? Does it create sort of superpowers for bad people?
Yeah, I mean, it has the potential. Obviously, with the use of AI, threat actors are able to potentially write better phishing emails, for an example. But they're not going to be sophisticated threat actors that are going to be doing that. Where it could be interesting is, the ability to kind of scale and weaponize, potentially malware development. But I'd say, I came from the Mandiant acquisition to Google Cloud, and we built up Mandiant Threat Intelligence. It has a lot of 15 plus years of holdings of threat intel, and we track threat actors globally. I would say we haven't really seen much of an uptick in the use of the prolific use of AI with threat actors that we track and follow. We've seen a little bit around sort of some of Chinese threat actors using perhaps deep fake technology, but outside of that, no, we haven't seen it as yet. But that's that's not to say that it couldn't pose a risk, but there's plenty of obviously things that you can do to mitigate that risk.
And in terms of you came from Mandiant into Google Cloud, big acquisition and a big statement of intent for Google. So in terms of rounding out the Google Cloud security portfolio and what that offers customers, because it's very differentiated, isn't it?
Yeah.
The starting point and the objective is fundamentally different to any other vendor.
Yeah, so I think the acquisition of Mandiant was kind of one of the largest, I think, or the largest that Google Cloud that made back in 2022. And I think, the main reasons why Mandiant was so attractive was really to do with the incident response and frontline threat intelligence experience that Mandiant had and still have today. So, for example, we do over 200,000 hours every year of incident response, and that's frontline IR. That's our consultants going out working with customers on incident response. And gain, what we learn on that frontline intelligence, we then obviously have the ability to build into our product. And the other side of it is that why Mandiant was kind of so important acquisition to Google was the depth of the threat intelligence. So, for example, we have nearly 400 analysts based globally that all they do every day is track the bad people, the threat actors, and turn that into operationalised and actionable threat intel that customers can do. Obviously, if you layer on then in the advent of AI and what you can do with AI in terms of being able to make sense of that and operationalise threat intel, it becomes like a really, really powerful proposition. So yeah, it's pretty exciting.
I was thinking that because you've got 40% of the world's internet traffic going through Google's data centres. You've then got Mandiant's massive database and capability. And I guess there's room for Gen AI to sort of take those weak signals and pull out things that
absolutely. So Google has built, or we've built a large language model that's purely for security. So what that means is taking, for example, the Mandiant threat intelligence and what we learn from that, adding in things like open source data. So, for example, open source intel as well as MITRE attack frameworks and other things. And we built the language model specifically built for trained and tuned for security practitioners, and that's kind of been built within our product.
So giving those superpowers to
giving superpowers, enabling upskilling.
I've just realised Matt's got to go in 7 minutes. But I think that sort of rounded that off. But thank you very much for that, Julie. So Matt has a day job and is also critical to record keeping here, and he has to go in 7 minutes. So do you want to just talk a little bit about your journey, the types of technology, how you've come up with the rig that is got a number of world records under its belt already?
Yes. So where this came about is that in order to officiate a Guinness World Record, you need multiple timing systems. So as all good engineering, we over-engineered it, came out with 3. We did 2 break the lines, and then we did 1 video recognition. So we take a live video stream, recognise when a cycle goes through it, and then we can then count that up and then legitimise it. When we submit that data, we then need the evidence in order to be able to do it. Now today, we are the 2 primary timing systems because the under track isn't on today, so no pressure. On a 24-hour one, we had a primary system, we did the secondary. So for the live video stream, we then take that data, process it, push it up into Google Cloud. We've got a Firebase application that's serving the data out quick. We've got a hosted app that scales up. And then the performance team then can see the immediate, as you can see, the dashboards, and then they'll relay some of that information through to James. Now, James used to have cycle computer on his bike, got rid of that, don't need that anymore, which is good, saves a bit of weight. I don't think he's let himself go, by the way. So the bike, he doesn't need to look down to that, he doesn't need to think about that. The performance coach can focus more on nutrition and about multiple records. So in the 24-hour challenge, we had 13 different records of all varying different speeds and whatever. So again, we had 13 screens running, so they can then see as the records come and go, and then you can then change your strategy. And this is partially a wider sort of, if you have the real-time data and you can make real-time decisions, you can then adjust it, you can see the result, and you're just constantly tweaking all the time. and all that marginal gain equates to world records and performance. And I think that's kind of, again, we translate that into most of the solutions we do for a lot of customers, being able to see those things. A lot of the transformative side of AI, as you talk about, the specialist large language models are really fascinating. So MedPalm, which has been rebranded, but MedPalm, all that grounding in anonymized patient records, and the same with the security from ambient data, all of that, you could never even dream of getting that data yourself. And having that ready and pre-trained large language models, which are really powerful, out of the box, ready to go, is incredible. And you can ground your own data on top of those as well. So your starting position of recognition and power is so high. It's remarkably high. We did a project recently. I'll make sure I'm not indiscreet as I normally am. So we did a project about classifying emails. Classic large language model case study. So we've got 2,000 inquiries coming in, 10 people a day, sifting, where does this go, which queue do you put it on? Classic use case. We can then process that in, all of that in less than 4 minutes. And its success rate out of the box, so this is baseline performance, was close to 85%. 85%, and the other stuff you couldn't classify anyway because there wasn't any information, it was just spam, right? So that's fine. And I think, and then we then pushed that a bit further, got up to about 95%. And I think this speed at which you can develop and the performance out of the box is really fascinating. And I think that's where Google, I think, really have developed a lot of tools that we can then utilize, adapt it to the business, tune it, and this isn't going to take years, not even months, right? And this is the kind of speed of development that we're really interested in doing. And if you're not doing it, your competitors are. So that's always that healthy dose of paranoia that you always need in this world, and we can help you get there a bit faster. But I think that's the thing about learning those lessons.
So I think you've just got enough time to run down. But one last comment.
Yes.
So when you're in the Newport Velodrome with James,
yes,
it's 24 hours. Your team were there throughout, and you tried to cheer them up with some strobe lighting and disco, and what happened to your systems?
So that was a bit unfortunate because we used image recognition, so we looked for a change in scene of the backgrounds, so they then strobed it up. And in fact, we had that problem this morning, so it was a little bit tense this morning because the strobing of the lights affected the camera. So we, it's another story, but we went out to Argos and we just bought a replacement camera. So thank God for Argos, right? so you know, solutions.
You should run now,
yeah,
Matt.
no worries.
You've got all right, 90 seconds to get tracked.
Okay, sorry, it was a bit rushed.
That's all right, cool.
Cheers. Right, and I'll be back up here anyway. So if you want to talk about anything, I'd be bored senseless about large language models and Gen AI. I'm happy to talk to any of you. So that's right.
Perfect. Thanks,
cheers.
Matt. So Matt kind of touched on it. I think Gen AI is creating a bunch of really interesting opportunities to have technology conversations with C-levels and line of business, and really open accounts in a way that tech companies usually can't. I mean, this is I guess, been the thread of what you've been doing the last 5 or 6 years, and why we're so keen for you to come and work with us to help businesses understand the impact of Gen AI. Can you give some examples of how we're using Gen AI to drive sales or drive efficiency and reduce costs?
So I think the key challenge with technology, I think nowadays isn't, it's kind of Matt joke that it's necessarily boring or whatnot, right? I mean, maybe 20, 30 years ago, if you want to be popular at a dinner party, you turn around and said, I'll tell you about Fortran, that seat would be vacated like it is now. Maybe it was something I said anyway. Of course, nowadays, right, you go to any kind of event and, even the most elderly family member will say, what about them AIs now, huh? And you go, wow, if you're informed, Granny. And so I think, the good news is that from an awareness perspective, right, everybody's much more engaged. People are generally conversant with the basic topics, which is great. The problem then is that once people know what it is, there's a very obvious follow-up, which is, so what does it do, right? Or more specifically, what can it do for me? And this is the bit where, technologists, sometimes struggle, right? Because, it's very easy to get sucked into the magic of technology itself, particularly working, in a company like Google. It's so easy to go down these technology rabbit holes. And then when you find yourself face to face with a customer, and you get these questions about, well, what can it do for me? Which usually means, what can I do for my very specific industry, right? My very specific domain. It becomes a lot harder to answer. Because it's not just a case of, well, it's simple, fire up your browser, right, load Gemini, and all of your worries are gone, right? And so you get into this kind of almost like translation game, right? I mean, it's the irony, right? Natural language translation has become better than ever, right? Google Translate, is now near perfect. But the challenge of translating, that technology into like a business solution, right? Putting it in a business context that people can relate to, in some ways is more difficult than ever because the technology is so broad, right? And so I think a lot of my efforts and a lot of the kind of, I guess, work that we're currently doing with our teams, is all about saying, how do I identify some of these kind of like key, pain points or key kind of opportunities or areas of friction in businesses where we really believe this technology can make an impact. And then figuring out how we create as simple as possible a means of solving that problem with technology.